All right,
Cool.
let's get started then.
Yeah, here we are in Brazil.
Here we are.
Already rolling. Hugo, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hosting and hanging out here and welcoming everybody to Brazil, Sao Paulo. And we're here for the Horasis Global Summit, is what we came out here for. But of course, I've known you for a little while, kind of in the network state movement, working on interesting governance and new solutions for humans in the future, I think. So societal solutions, economic solutions, a lot of innovation there. So thank you for having us here and giving us some time. Maybe you can give us a little idea of your background, really interesting, some of the work you've done in finance and banking, and just give her a little bit of idea there.
Sure, so thanks you for coming. Brazil is a long way from pretty much everywhere in the world, so I really appreciate this effort to understand what's going on here. So my background is effectively finance, way before being governance actually. So finance and then technology, fintech bundled, and then with the governance layer more recently. So I actually started in asset management, managing a few institutional mandates for large pension funds in emerging markets, Latin America, Southeast Asia. Then I had my own boutique investment bank. And in my last 6 years, initially as a founder, do everything, then formal CEO and now non-executive board member, I created A55, which is a fintech, a lender. So it was really inspired by Silicon Valley Bank in the US, but with a more digital component. So if I compare this with SVB in the US, SVB basically takes startup money, offers startups banking services. But on the other side, on the asset side, basically SVB takes the money and invests in mortgage-backed security in Florida, which is actually why they almost blew up a few years ago.
Yeah.
What we do is basically to operate this on a closed ecosystem, so by startups for startups, and really understanding that the new economy needs some specialty lending. So basically offering payments and accounts. And then, but mostly offering like growth credit lines so that basically the financial markets can appreciate a new kind of collateral that's basically data, audience, recurring revenue. To understand almost like a future income statement from those companies and up from this from a spot receivable or recurring receivable perspective. Because these kind of companies, they have no real assets such as real estate or agriculture or land. So we need to use what they have to be able to fund them. And now tech companies represent roughly 20% of the world GDP. 14 out of the top 15 biggest market caps in the world are tech companies. So obviously we anticipated back in the days that the banking sector and banking industry and lending industry should understand those shifts and be able also to underwrite those companies. And what was very special about it is that A, it was a startup, so we were not born as an established bank. B, we worked with technology, so using technology at the core of underwriting. And C was interoperability. So we didn't have balance sheet, we didn't have assets under management, so we needed to partner with central banks, private banks, development banks, and after 2021 with decentralized finance protocols to be able to tap new pools of fundings. And actually this was the transition between pure finance to governance, mostly because of this interoperability. So like how to bundle the laws of startups with the laws of the internet and with the laws of national markets, national states, international markets, and international states. And I was much more interested about how to interoperate those worlds, much more than how to enhance and optimize the net interest margin, of your last line of your income statement, which is typically what you are required to do as a bank. And I think where we did well was much more to like governance innovation, much more than net interest margin optimization actually. And then the rest is history and the context where we met for the future of governance.
Yeah, and that governance is an important element, right? In startups and VC investment, governance is always very important. So, was there somewhat of a, I guess, a decentralization of that through the process and the platform? So you're able to change, like, what was the kind of the change in the governance element there, opposed to traditional VC
So I think you
investment?
have two ways to look at it. I think one way was to say that we innovated because we could be a lender without being a bank, and then it somehow decentralized the way we typically think about lending, and then money wasn't permissionless, but was like semi-permission, I would say.
Okay.
One very important element was, I think, from this approach of decentralization was basically the ability during COVID to bypass banks' balance sheets. And for the first time in history, actually, of capitalism, we had a nation state, like a central bank, printing M3, like primary credit, not into a bank's balance sheet, but into an internet wallet and protocol as an emergency program. And why? Because SMBs had 40 days of cash with hard shutdown, no social security, no rescue financing, and even the state-owned banks that were supposed to be the more, I would say, widespread distribution channels to reach the entire population had less of a reach than the internet. So this is why the states say, hey, let's use like the internet to go to the last mile and use Google, Facebook, Mercado Libre or Amazon or whatever kind of like internet social or internet logistics retail interface to mint a wallet and to distribute credit, because people wouldn't drive 50 miles, to go to an agency because they were not leaving their home because of COVID, right? So this is one aspect of decentralization. And the other aspect of decentralization, I think, is really this ability to navigate with DeFi protocols, like to go fully permissionless, and then to bundle like a permissionless financial protocol to like a centralized protocol that's the current private banking and the central bank aspect, which is what we did mostly after 2021. So I think those two components incorporated some degree of decentralization.
Nice. And then this kind of, I guess, almost organically moved into tools for the commons, right? This was almost maybe the next step to go there. And this is what's exciting in the decentralized space, is tools for the commons, and how we then really get into governance and operations on a broader scale. So how is that going with tools for the commons?
Correct. So I think A55, mostly after 2021, but it started with the public-private partnerships, and then even more connecting, with decentralized protocols. Create like a very fertile ground to understand like governance interoperability and how laws are actually plastic and you can rebundle them in very different ways, initially for the flow of funds. But then when you really understand crypto and mostly crypto interoperability, like for me, reading Balaji's book in 2023 was a wonderful timing, because when you, like, Balaji basically starts from like so he basically draws like a 5-step sequence that basically leads to the network state. So first startup companies, then social networks, then cryptocurrencies. And then he extrapolates like the future of finance through crypto to the future of cities and countries. Understanding cities and countries are pretty much the same thing as like governance protocols, right? So cities like social hardware, and the countries like social software, if you can say this. And then there's his methodology, of like going the step by step. So like a startup stack, then crowdfund territory, and then gain diplomatic recognition. And it's something that if you stick to Balaji's definition and you replace finance by governance, or better said, like governance by finance, it's exactly what I did with A55. Of like unbundling the entire finance stack and rebundling this, plugging societies, so like startups, crowdfunding this, and gaining diplomatic recognition with governance interoperability. So then I actually broke my head into how could we replace finance by governance to stick to Balaji's playbook and keeping the essence of emerging economies and ascending societies, which is where I come from, that are very different than mature economies and probably like descending civilizations. That's the case of the Western civilization mostly. So then I came out with this recipe of a sort of a Balaji's playbook from Africa, Latam, Southeast Asia. And then instead of calling this like let's say a fintech, we call this new rail like a digital economic zone or a digital special economic zone that could play the same role as a sort of like VPN or gateway that would basically connect legacy institutions, national states, national markets, international states, international markets. And then so that would say layer 0. And then enhance layer 2, that would be like those startup societies and then people who want to sign a different kind of social contract. And then build the missing middle, that's basically the governance plug-in that connects those two through digital special economic zones. So we got started like this and then got our first host in Africa. And since then, we've been working for about 15 months on this.
And this is different, you know, than the kind of social feeling of burn it down. This is really more, you're using the mechanisms and the parts of the system that are already there and really just reconfiguring them so they serve us better, right? To serve the human needs better. It's not about replace it. One of the things I'm excited in is the concept of parallel societies, being the idea that we're not attacking or taking down what exists, but actually just using what we've already learned to create better systems, right? And so it's important to kind of take from that and build something new. Where are you right now? It's been about 2 years, been following you. It's been pretty nice progress, moving along. Surviving is a pretty good place to be. That's a good sign so far. What's the updates? What's the updates on Tools for the Commons?
So, yeah, I mean, on your first consideration, yeah, we do want to serve the 99%, not the 1%. So this is why we are so focused on interoperability, because if we just focus on like crypto native people, we are basically missing on the immense bulk of humanity. And it's a shame, because even if we slightly open this from a tech component and just go Web 2 instead of going Web 3, then we tap at least 60-70% of humanity. And then if you go last mile state or co-ops, then we get like literally 99%. So on the first consideration, and then how do we do this, and updates on progress. So the elephant in the room for us by far is East Africa, with our flagship project, that's Zanzibar. So in Zanzibar, we teamed up with a venture creator called Our World that have many business lines. One of them, the core one, is called Threefold. So it's a decentralized compute network and storage network that basically, you can consider it as an internet cooperative, basically. And this business unit basically digitally hosts a digital special economic zone that has been negotiated 2 years ago by the Republic of Zanzibar. And those two combines, they configure, let's say, the holding company or the property company or the manco of the zone. And then this manco has an operating agreement with us as a zone operator, zone servicer, and zone distributor. And basically, we took this sort of like empty country, like piece of paper that says, hey, you've got a country. And then we took this from you've got a country to please operate it, right? And then where we came in is, hey, just operate it. So how do we operate it? It's like write a charter. So literally starting from first things first, like we, the people, and then what comes next, you know, to split the code. So splitting the criminal code from civil code, commercial code, tax code, digital asset regulation, dispute resolution mechanisms, program all this in software, interoperate this and connect this to blockchain networks, and finally build like a cool UI UX on top of this, respecting the governance of Threefold to be able to have like to host this in their DPIN, and to also have like some redundancy of hosting and storage within the ICT authority in Zanzibar. So all this took us more than a year just to build this. So that's the main update. Now we are live, we are ready to onboard the first batch of residents. Everybody is more than welcome to be the founding residents and citizens of the zone. That's probably the most sophisticated zone in the world. And now we are launching about 15 different projects with very similar characteristics. It's obviously like a very long and negotiation cycle because we are discussing sovereignty. And most of the projects are actually in South America and Africa, and to a lesser extent, Asia as well.
Yeah, and this is exciting because you're taking a very small government, a small place, but it can have an outsized impact, right? Because you're really operating the digital space there. So now anybody around the world can plug into this local area. And it's not that they all have to move there or live there or be there, but you're creating this extra digital layer where people can interact and exchange. And it brings great benefit to the country, right? So what kind of benefits does it bring? Does it bring tax revenue for them? What kind of benefit does it bring this small country, and what does that seed do? You're planting a seed in this location.
Yeah.
And there's a few other countries that are doing this as well.
Yeah, correct. And actually, like, so the main argument is the digital economic zone, the digital component, but there's also a physical component to it.
Sure.
So there's a small physical area, 70 hectares in near Stone Town, so in the peninsula of Fumba, and another 30 hectares in Pemba Island, north of Ugunji. But the most interesting thing is the digital aspect. So right. What we pitch the country is, hey, so in Zanzibar now there are 1.8 million people. What we tell them is that there's no way they bring tomorrow 2 million great startups physically, but they could bring 2 million great startups digitally, yeah. With the proper infrastructure. So they have this opportunity to basically extrapolate and abstract a new kind of GDP for the country that's non-territorial by nature, but that's sovereign and that's taxable, actually. So that's a way for them to increase their addressable market, to diversify their taxable base as well, beyond their traditional residents and beyond tourism as well, which is the main cross-border activity they have nowadays. And we do have a tax agreement. So basically, out of the P&L of the joint venture, 5% of any registered entity's net income is paid as a tax to the government of Zanzibar.
Nice, nice. And this is an important thing to keep in mind also. You know, a lot of people think of crypto, they say, oh, you're trying to avoid taxes. Well, I think for most people who are thinking critically, it's really more about how do we create a structure that still generates, it's not to hide everything, but how do we actually make a system where those taxes are benefiting the people and that those benefits are coming around in a circular impact, right? So yeah, we pay the man, give the taxes to those who provide the services, and let's make sure that that impact is coming around there.
Yeah, correct. And it's very easy to make like a zero tax or even negative tax environment. Right. Actually, we do want governments to charge taxes. Yeah. Because A, it's fair, it's partnership. B, it incentivizes them basically to push the zone and to promote the zone as well with us. And then it can also like create some healthy competition, I would say, to basically show the neighbors that the neighbors are actually making some money with this, and then maybe it can also like create this kind of raising the bar, in other aspects than just taxes, and to think about how to become competitive to host specific industries outside just like the zero tax argument, which because everybody will lose the race to the tax bottom.
Of course, yeah. yeah. Well, and the important thing also here is the integration point. So we're
Yeah.
able to then create this borderless economy.
Yeah.
So really, we're starting to integrate then many nations,
Yeah.
many communities, digital and physical. And coming here to Sao Paulo for Horasis, the theme was collaboration on many levels, right? Horasis is a very interesting group. This was my second year here with Frank Jürgen. Amazing. I don't know how he keeps track of everybody's name and story. It's absolutely incredible. What was your impression with Horasis? I think, was this your first year, second year?
Second year.
Second year, okay. So what is your thoughts on Horasis, the experience we had here, and you were pretty involved in it.
Yeah.
What's your impression kind of Horasis and that movement?
So I think the value of Horasis is about people, right? So very selfishly, I was very happy to host Horasis in São Paulo. So São Paulo is not as central as the Middle East or Europe, to host such an event. So I was glad that more than 1,000 people made it here. I was glad to have this kind of conversation in São Paulo, which is not so common. So São Paulo is not the political capital, so nobody discusses politics here. It's not a very cultural city. I think the cultural capitals in Brazil are probably more like Salvador and Rio. So here it's really like a business city where we discuss at length business and finance all the time. And I was very glad, to have this kind of enriching circles beyond business in São Paulo. But at the same time, usually like the cities that tend to create like the bigger network effects and the bigger demographies, and hence being more lively, are typically like economic capital. So I think it's an interesting example of how to think differently about like cities and these kind of gatherings, because in many countries such as the US or Brazil or even China, like the political capital is not the economic capital, and the political capital is way smaller than the economic capital. And then the political capital is trying to force many things down, and actually it doesn't work like this.
Right.
And there's something very interesting about cities, like from Alain Berthaud. He's one of OSPA's advisors, and he was at the conference. When you want to overplan a city or a society, it just doesn't work, because like the beauty of a city, of a society, is like this unplanned chaos that happens, So that's why I think that cities like Lagos, like Shanghai, like São Paulo are probably better positioned, to be catalysts of this kind of environment, rather than cities that were supposedly planned for this, that are missing, on this random chaos. So I was very glad to have people in São Paulo, to have like change makers, to have wisdom keepers, to have entrepreneurs like of very different areas, to have so many foreigners as well. São Paulo is not a city for foreigners. Brazil is a very close country. So having so many foreigners here was surprising and was great. And then I think we've been able to overcome the last minute logistics shift, and obviously it wasn't probably the infrastructure of Davos as initially planned, with like a expo center, etc. But I think people could meet, could have quality time, and this is probably what everybody will remember at the end of the day. Yeah, we can go on a whole tangent, anthropologically, sociologically, should politics and governance be emergent or controlling? That's a fun story that, of course, network state folks like talking about. And it was amazing, the response. There was some last minute, like you're saying, logistics issue, and quickly people stepped in, and it changed, and it was a beautiful event.
What do you see? We were talking about Brazil in general and Sao Paulo, just a little bit briefly. Banking and agriculture, you were telling me, is kind of really the focus of this area, especially agriculture innovation. Really interesting, exciting to hear this. What is some quick observation on the trajectory of Sao Paulo and Brazil? And I understand these are also a lot of variety within Brazil, the different regions. So just because we're here, what do you see we're going here?
Yeah, so probably a wrap up of the conversation we had this weekend, right? But I think that Brazil and São Paulo are very legitimate to discuss anthropology and society systems for the world, for many different reasons. But the main ones are that it's a country that matters in terms of size and representation and GDP. It's a country that embodies both what humanity does best and the worst of humanity at the same time. So we carry very serious scars of history. But we also carry I think we embody abundance, right? So I think we carry the biggest scars of what humanity can possibly do bad, and the absolute collective abundance with diversity at the same time over a country of the size of a continent, 200 million people, and almost 400 years of absolute peace, which is unheard of. Like if you look, most of the big powers, I think Brazil is probably the only peaceful or structurally peaceful big country in the world. With no history of wars. Brazil has weapons only for 17 seconds of a World War III of high intensity. So that's why the entire geopolitics of Brazil is necessarily peaceful. So I like this. Anthropological differences. We have Arabs, we have indigenous people, we have Japanese people, we have European people. So it's a big mix. And then in terms of sectors, I also think that I also have some reservations with Brazil. So I think that Brazil cannot represent, the absolute magnificence of what civilization can do, because Brazil is also incapable of creating a sense of nation and a sense of unity as a community where the aggregation of the parts is better than individual, is bigger than individual people. So there's nothing like this. It's not like a Confucianist civilization. You don't have something as strong, let's say, as Islam, or you don't have, the same kind of social contracts that you could find in India, mostly the north of India, which I think are probably like the most powerful OS, for civilization. But my main point is that Brazil has the legitimacy, 94% digital penetration. Brazil is feeding the world, so I think the green revolution is happening here, mostly to feed the world of more than 10 billion people. Then there's urbanism at scale, but also it's a very, let's say, a countryside country where we have like this rural culture, and we have like all those co-ops as well that are very representative of collaboration. If you go back to Horasis as the future of collaboration. And then it's also quite connected to themes such as, at the same time, the sort of like capital corridor. So, like here it looks like New York, so I think it's right spot on of this, like Shanghai, London, New York kind of capitalist world that's been very strong in the 19th and 20th century. But at the same time, it's a key node, in this BRICS plus country and this kind of global South alliance. So I think it's legitimate, and with a few reservations I just mentioned.
Well, and who knows what the new generations are coming with. There's a lot of very interesting changes in young people, US, Europe, Asia, thinking very differently than even people who are in their 20s and 30s now. And well, I think nobody can guess exactly where we're going, but when we have this global interconnectivity happening all the time, people are exposed to new ideas. We talked a little bit before about how there is not so much of motivation for major upward movement to some degree culturally, and maybe this will change, and then it'll be interesting to see how this moves forward if people see upward movement or other things changing on the global scene. And to that point, you know, getting close to wrapping up here, there are a lot of people building in the network state, in agriculture, finance, tech. People are out there, especially young people, looking for new solutions and creating new solutions. You've been through a success, maybe some failures. We are always up and down. I'm curious what message you have for people who are out there trying to create something new that is good, will create some impact, generate returns, profitable. So what recommendation, what kind of feedback, or what words of wisdom from your experience do you have to share with young people out there that want to build something and make a difference?
Well, a few. Number one, come to Brazil to understand what legitimacy means from an anthropological perspective. So if you don't feel legitimate about understanding how random people can basically come out together and build wealth together at every single level, come to Brazil. I think it's a very good stamp to read the world and then re-promote whatever civilizational package to the world. Number two, go to Africa. So the future of the world is not being crafted here, it's being crafted in Africa. Africa is going to add 2 billion people by the end of the century. 75% of them will live in cities. So at the beginning of the 20th century, from a demographic perspective, we could fit 3 Africas within Europe. By the end of these centuries, we will be able to fit 3 Europes within Africa, right? So, and it's a young population. So Brazil is not making a lot of babies. I think fertility rate is falling below 2 here. Mostly because in the big centers, big capitals like Rio, São Paulo, it's very expensive to have a child. Safety is also an issue. So basically the reproduction rate is pretty low in the big capitals. So Brazil will have like a meaningful problem, you know, with a generational transition. And then what I would tell people is that like stop worshipping like, you know, the Zuckerbergs of the life, but start worshipping, you know, like the founding fathers, or Lee Kuan Yew, or Deng Xiaoping, or you know, like people who've been able to, who will be remembered for bringing prosperity engines at scale for their societies. And I think a company is like a very narrow engine of wealth creation. So it certainly enriches like stakeholders to unbelievable extents. But it's not the most powerful flywheel if you want to build a society, you know, like or a city, because you just have, I mean, it's a triangle with 3 stakeholders. You have shareholders, you have customers, and you have employees. Right. And shareholders, so they have a monopoly on capital and they have a monopoly, you know, on your bottom line. Shareholders are, it's called labor, so just an input into a balance sheet, where it's labor is still considered the same way as Fordism, you know, so like 9 to 5, just an input, like a cattle input in a balance sheet. So I think, so on that side, you don't necessarily create like a very enriching relationship with your employees, at least the way the present of work is. Maybe certainly the future of work is different. And then you have your customers, but even your customers, it's like a bilateral relationship. It's like a debit versus credit. It's like a delivery versus payment against your direct counterparty. And you have no system of accounting of the flywheel that all this creates, you know. So it's like a very narrow triangle. So for whoever builds a company, you know, to make more individual money than Zuckerberg, build a corporation. for those who want to build a company mostly to boost their ego, I actually think that building a society or a city is more powerful to boost your ego. And for those who do this like genuinely like to create like massive prosperity, jump into the space. Now there are tools, governments, many governments are ready, some funds are ready, some builders are ready, some thinkers are ready. So I think we have like an ecosystem in place to welcome great entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's exciting. We're very focused on integrating those things. Stakeholders, our shareholders, our users. Impact reaches across all of the parties, right? And legacy is the thing to build. If it's for ego, then legacy is really what it's about, is what did I leave behind? What kind of impact did we have on society?
Yeah.
Wow, powerful words. Good one, man. Hugo, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having
me. Good to
me.
catch you again. We keep building. Exciting to see what's next for Tools for the Commons, and then the next big one you go after and create. Appreciate the impact you're making out there.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming to my office by adoption.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.